Hello, I'm Lee Majors. A miracle is often thought of as a heavenly event. So are technological discoveries, such as bionics, something I've had a little experience with. Today, we'll look at documented cases that have changed the lives of some very special people. Our first story could be defined as an intervention of the Most High. Can one man harness this blissful power to turn a crippling disease into a crowning achievement? In our journey through life, there's often so much we take for granted. Frequently, it isn't until catastrophe strikes that we realize just how precious every aspect of life is. The most difficult lesson was recently learned by Robert Skillman of Red Bluff, California. After exercising one day, Robert noticed a tingling in his hands. Initially, he thought nothing of it, but then the sensation spread to the rest of his body.
At first, when everything felt like it was going to sleep, I kept thinking it's going to wake up. Rubbing, it's going to wake up, and it didn't wake up. It went to sleep and died.
Robert underwent tests, the results of which were evaluated by his physician, Dr. Don Nelson. Robert's x-rays showed a grave abnormality.
I think anybody that looked at him would say, this man's in big, big trouble.
Robert had developed a condition which caused an overgrowth of bone and tissue in his vertebrae.
This white material, between the two lines of white material is the spinal cord. And then you get up to this point and the spinal cord appears to almost disappear. This is really very severe cervical stenosis.
In layman's terms, Robert's spinal cord was being crushed by abnormal growth. And by the time he was diagnosed, Robert had lost all feeling from the neck down. Recommended treatment included surgery to relieve pressure on the spinal cord, followed by intense physical therapy. The surgery was performed, but the limits of Robert's medical coverage prohibited therapy. Sadly, without it, he would never fully regain the use of his body. Until this point, Robert had handled his misfortune well, but this unexpected turn was more than he could bear.
I raged against God for letting this happen. What have I done to deserve this? I raged against the state for not providing me physical therapy, at least giving me a hope of getting better.
Robert's anger became grief, and his grief turned into self-pity. He was on a downward spiral that seemed endless. He knew the pattern had to stop, so he decided to do the one thing he still could do without help. He prayed.
My prayers were, at first they were gripe sessions. I griped and complained. Finally, there was a point of complete surrender. I said, God, if this is your will, do let me lie here a vegetable for the rest of my life. If that is your will for me, then give me the strength to accept that. And if you cannot give me the strength to accept that, then I will not be satisfied unless you heal me.
Robert prayed for a miracle, as did his congregation and pastor.
I knew that God could heal, and that physicians had treated, and he had very competent surgeons, but we would leave the healing part to God.
But even with prayers, Robert's condition continued to deteriorate.
For a period of time, it seemed to actually get worse after surgery rather than better. And then there was a rather sudden improvement about 6 months after surgery.
This sudden improvement was nothing less than the miracle for which everyone prayed. For no apparent earthly reason, Robert showed signs of movement in his arms and legs. With great difficulty, he was soon able to stand. And over time, with some assistance, the former quadriplegic walked. Though not exactly the person he used to be, Robert made phenomenal progress. Together with his congregation, he thanked God for his miraculous recovery. But God wasn't finished with Robert yet. The following week, he returned to church, this time without his walker. Robert had been completely healed. His friends were astonished. He was literally a walking miracle. Looking back on the experience, Robert now understands why he was prohibited from receiving physical therapy.
God allowed me not to have it so that he could get the glory. I was denied physical therapy so that when I was completely restored, not just partially restored, completely restored, human beings, especially medical science, could not say that they had anything to do with the restorative process other than the initial stabilization.
Robert's amazing experience has taught him three things.
First of all, it has taught me that God is absolutely sovereign. He can do anything he wants whenever he wants to. Secondly, a person doesn't have to be good or holy or righteous to receive a miracle. Now, I know this empirically because I'm none of those things, and I got a miracle. The third thing I've learned is that when God does a miracle, when he directly intervenes in a person's life, it's for a reason.
Robert believes God's plan for him involves a life of prayer.
Been able to pray for others for special healing before, but since my own miracle, it's nothing less than astounding. In gratitude for what God has done for me, I'm going to continue praying for others.
Robert has recently organized a group which meets weekly to pray for the healing of the sick and to share the message of miracles. Needless to say, Robert is a dedicated believer in the power of prayer.
The people who have been touched by this power know that it is the real thing and that it is from God.
The magnitude of Robert's miracle is extraordinary, but the greater miracle is in the method used to attain it, a method available to us all. The power of prayer turned tragedy into triumph and gave Robert a second chance at life. And as he continues along life's journey, it can be certain he will relish every precious moment and never again take anything for granted. You know, there have been many cases of mothers and their children connecting spiritually to each other, sometimes from thousands of miles away. A boy is injured and his mother simultaneously feels a sharp pain in her side. Or she senses tragedy on a plane trip her daughter will make and begs her not to fly. She doesn't, but learns through a news flash that her flight crashed, killing everyone on board. The awareness of family spirit is perhaps the most enduring and purest miracle of them all. The bond between mother and child begins the instant a woman perceives life in her womb. And once established, this connection grows into a love so complete that for the sake of her child's safety, a mother will do anything, even lay down her own life. Ironically, this ultimate act of a mother's love also brings about the end of her maternal devotion. Or does it? Some people believe that Chrissy Skubish loved her son so much that not even death could keep her from safeguarding him. Some believe that before departing this world, Chrissy got help from the next world to ensure the survival of her only child. Chrissy's story begins with a dream her aunt had.
I dreamed of me sitting in the back seat of a car. It was night, and I could see a silhouette of a little boy standing in a seat. And I could see a woman driving, and all I could see out of the window was just light.
Karen had previously had dreams which turned out to be precursors to family misfortune. Though she could not decipher this dream's exact meaning, she knew it did not bode well. 2 days later, she learned Chrissy and her little boy, Nick, were missing. Last seen on Highway 50 in Northern California, Chrissy was driving to Nevada and then on to Southern California to see her Aunt Karen.
When she didn't arrive where she was supposed to arrive, I figured, you know, she just changed her mind. So I didn't really get worried about it for a day or two, and then I did. An
investigation was initiated, but the authorities had little to go on. At one point, a man reported seeing an unusual sight on Highway 50, but no one felt it was case-related until later.
He had a cellular phone, and he stopped right there, and from the spot called 911 because he seen a woman running backwards and forth on the side of the road there.
Meanwhile, Karen's concern for Chrissy grew.
I mean, I had no idea if she had been abducted, if she had been in a wreck. I didn't know why she was missing.
Karen knew her worrying was only wasting precious time and decided to focus her energy on pinpointing her niece's location.
When I would try to visualize where she could be, I could only see those exits out of Placerville.
Though the vision was not clear, Karen's desire to find Chrissy was. So she and her husband, John, set out on an 8-hour trek to Placerville, a town not far from where the woman was seen running on the road. At about the same time, Deborah Hoyt and her husband, Nicholas, were leaving Placerville. Like Chrissy, they were driving toward Nevada on Highway 50. Deborah was watching for deer, but what she saw was the most shocking thing she'd ever witnessed. Lying on the roadside was the nude body of a woman.
She was really, really white. I kept remembering to myself that she must have been in the cold for a long time to be so white.
Horrified by the ghastly discovery, the Hoyts raced to a nearby telephone, where Deborah notified the California Highway Patrol.
She stood by and waited for them and went into the CHP vehicle with one of the CHP officers and searched the area. However, they were unable to find anything. They thought it was kind of strange because she was very sincere in what she believed she saw.
But what had Deborah seen? Though the officers conducted a thorough search, a body could not be found, nor was there evidence that one had ever been there. Was Deborah mistaken? Was there really a nude woman on the road?
She was serious and believed that's what she had seen, and was still upset when they weren't able to find the body, which she believed she'd seen.
As the officers investigated Deborah's claim, Karen had another premonition.
I just felt there was going to be something on the side of the road that would be a belonging, a toy, a ring. I didn't know. If Chris had been there, there was going to be something I was going to find.
Karen arrived in Placerville about dawn and notified the sheriff's department that she and her husband planned to search Highway 50 on foot to find whatever that something was. Deputy Strasser was on duty at the time, and seeing the determination in Karen's eyes, decided it would be best if he accompanied her. With Karen and John a distance behind him, the deputy led them down Highway 50. Because it was now daylight, Deputy Strasser felt he should also follow up on the Deborah Hoyt sighting. He drove to the spot where the nude woman had been reported. When he got there, he didn't find a body, but he did find something that was not there the night before.
Near what we call Bullion Bend, east of Pollock Pines, I found a child's tennis shoe in the roadway.
The shoe was Nick's, and further investigation revealed the wreckage of a car.
The car was in pretty bad shape. It had hit a tree and kind of tumbled a little bit. And I found in the driver's seat, I found a white female.
It was Chrissy. Unfortunately, she had perished in the crash.
I looked over and I saw a young, nude boy basically lying in the passenger seat in a fetal position. And I believe both of them were killed as a result of the accident.
But Nick was alive, a fact many found amazing, because the 3.5-year-old had been without food or water for over 5 days. Also during that time, the temperatures had ranged from 40 degrees at night to over 100 degrees during the day. It is believed Nick removed his clothing when the heat became too much for him. Suffering from hypothermia and severe dehydration, Nick was rushed to a nearby hospital.
The doctor said if Nick had been there another hour, 2 hours, that he wouldn't have. I mean, Nicky was close to death when he was found.
But thanks to Karen's premonitions and Deputy Strausser's police work, Nick was found in time and recovered. But what of the dead woman on the roadside? Is she owed a debt of gratitude as well? Her presence did bring attention to the site, which in turn brought Nick's rescuers. Some have speculated that what Deborah saw was Chrissy Skubish's ghost. But Chrissy's family rejects that theory.
I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in angels. And Chrissy felt very strongly that God appointed to each and every child of his a guardian angel. I mean, she was a strong believer in that. I feel that it was her or Nicky's guardian angel.
Nick's conversations since the accident seemed to confirm his grandmother's belief.
When a baby does say things they see, you have to listen. And he did say that he'd seen a naked woman. He said there was two. One lady was running on the road. He could see her running back and forth. And we asked, where was the other one? And he said she was standing next to the car door by him.
Was the naked woman Nick saw a guardian angel? If so, why was she so agitated?
Nicky was there. Nicky was still alive. God had to draw attention to that area some way.
Nick himself has talked of angels visiting him while he waited to be rescued.
He has told his grandmother that he's seen Jesus' angels and that they're very pretty.
And when asked how his shoe mysteriously appeared on the road, Nick gave an unexpected response.
And I said, did it fall out of the car? And he said, I don't know. And then he said, maybe Angel put it there. And I said, maybe, Nicky, maybe.
He'll tell you that my mommy died, and you tell him you know. And he said, but I died too, and I was with Jesus.
Did Nick die and go to heaven? If so, why was he sent back?
God's got a plan for Nicky. Now, what it may be, I don't know. But there was a reason why God kept him alive. I intend to be there when he gets there and help him there. I'm going to help him along the way, and I'm going to be there when he achieves whatever it is God has in mind for him. I mean, things like this don't happen every day.
Brenda and her husband Dave have recently adopted Nick. And a year after losing his mother, Nick is doing just fine. He has even mastered saying his new name.
Nick Anthony Skubish Strassenbach.
Great.
Let's go play.
No one can be certain what the future holds for Nick, who has been called a miracle boy. But whatever God does have in store for him, it's certain that Chrissy will be watching over her child with a mother's love that will not die. The stories we just saw dealt with great inspiration and faith. These are the true miracles of the soul. Many skeptics claim that one's psychic ability or a faith in God is nothing more than mind over matter, better known to us as physician, heal thyself. But there is a great amount of truth in that. But still, there are those moments when something unexplainable takes over where logic leaves off. It's at this point that mind over matter doesn't apply, and the real miracle stems from the power beyond our control. A man is nearly killed in a horrible accident and is rushed to a hospital where doctors valiantly perform life-saving procedures. But their efforts are sadly in vain. As death rapidly approaches, the doctor consoles the man's family and tells them that all they can do now is pray. But what is the doctor basing his advice on? Does he truly believe prayer can do what medical science couldn't? Or is he just mouthing an empty cliche? Traditionally, physicians have scoffed at the notion of prayer as a treatment option for their patients. But today, that tradition is being undone by former Chief of Staff at Medical City Dallas Hospital, Dr. Larry Dawsey, who is sending shockwaves through the medical community with its news that prayer indeed does work.
We've always said that there isn't any proof that prayer works. If you want to believe in prayer, you're on thin ice. There isn't any proof, and belief is just a matter of faith and fantasy. I think the proof that prayer works is one of the best-kept medical secrets going.
In his book, Dr. Dawsey outlines over 130 studies which prove there is power in prayer. But the doctor wasn't always a believer.
When I went to medical school, I became your self-respecting agnostic, and I stayed that way for many, many years. And I, like all well-trained physicians who believed in the power of science and objectivity, knew that the only way to solve medical problems was through drugs and surgical procedures and through things that you could basically hold in your hand and see.
But later, Dr. Dawsey was forced to question his steadfast convictions.
I will never forget an incident that happened to me the first year I was in medical practice, which really knocked my socks off. This patient of mine was dying from lung cancer. He refused all treatment. The only thing that he got in terms of therapy was that his congregation from the church ringed his bedside during all visiting hours and prayed nonstop for the man. I sent him home to die because he didn't choose to have any therapy.
1 year later, Dr. Dawsey learned the man was back at the hospital with a bad case of the flu. Amazed the patient had not succumbed to his disease, Dawsey, with great curiosity, examined the man's current x-rays.
The radiologist report said, in the intervening 12 months, this man has had a dramatic response to therapy. The chest x-ray is now normal. The radiologist assumed that the man had had chemotherapy or some medication which made this cancer go away. I knew that the only therapy that the man had was prayer. This case disturbed me a lot.
Though having been a witness to a miracle, the doctor was still a doctor.
I didn't want anything to do with this prayer business. I really got involved in it, sort of kicking and screaming against my better medical judgment, and the thing that helped me more than anything was science.
Ironically, the spiritual answers for which Dr. Dawsey was searching lay amongst the same scientific journals which initially caused him to reject prayer.
I went to a lot of trouble and work to uncover these studies, and I was stunned by the depth and the breadth of this evidence. The most famous study involving prayer has gone on at San Francisco General Hospital.
The study involved 393 people who had all suffered heart attacks. Patients were given comparable, state-of-the-art care, but some also received care of a supernatural nature.
Half of these people, unknown to them, have their first names farmed out to various prayer groups around the country who pray for them. And when the results were in, it looked as if the prayed-for group had been given some sort of special advantage.
Special indeed, because those patients who had been prayed for were incredibly 3 times less likely to develop complications, 5 times less likely to require antibiotics, and had a consistently higher survival rate than those patients who were not remembered in prayer.
The most remarkable thing that has happened in the study of prayer is simply the finding that it works. That's got to be major medical news in this century.
Experiments have also been conducted on animals, plants, and even bacteria.
We can show in these very delicate studies that prayer works not on human beings, but on these lower organisms. This is really important because the skeptics say that if prayer works, it's just a matter of positive thinking and the effects of suggestion and expectation.
But clearly, animals, plants, and bacteria cannot respond to suggestion and positive thinking as we do. So what's the answer? How does prayer work?
I think sooner or later we probably will have a scientific explanation for prayer, but it's only fair to say we don't have one yet. We often have had therapies in medicine which we used before we knew how they worked. Penicillin is a great example. When penicillin was discovered, we didn't have a clue how it worked, but we knew that it worked. And we didn't let the lack of a theory stand in our way of using it. It's the same with prayer.
There are basically 2 ways to pray: praying for oneself and praying for others. We asked Dr. Dawsey if he became ill, which method he would use.
Since we know they both work, if I were sick, I would use both. And I personally would get on as many prayer lists as I could.
Dr. Dawsey isn't the only practitioner who has accepted this alternative form of healing.
A recent survey has shown that 43% of physicians in the United States actually pray for their patients. Now, most of my colleagues wouldn't be caught dead praying in public. My hunch is that when the information supporting it scientifically becomes better known, it will be widely used and probably publicly by physicians. And as they do so, medicine as we know it will never be the same.
Will this earth-shaking information become accepted and utilized publicly by the medical community, as Dr. Dawsey surmises? With so many physicians already giving credence to this supernatural power as a healing tool, it seems likely that doctors, in addition to medication, will also one day prescribe prayer, the ultimate miracle cure. Tragedy is an entity that strikes at any time, any place. No one can prepare for the horrors that may arise in life. It's something that most would rather not think about. One young lady, unfortunately, had no choice. Here's her courageous story of survival. On just an ordinary morning, a woman did the most extraordinary thing. As flames engulfed her neighbor's home, she confronted the raging fire head-on, while 70% of her body was still covered with unhealed burns from her own horrific encounter. It all started with a trip. Rennell and Terry Wallace had planned to try to patch their broken marriage. With their own small aircraft, the world's problems were beneath them. But with this trip, a little voice warned Rennell not to go.
The feeling came so strong that I literally started to pull a pad out from behind me and started to write out my last will and testament.
I begged her not to go, but for some reason she had the feeling that she had to go, that it was something that she had to do.
A heavy storm hit. Things started getting out of control.
We saw a little dirt road, and he says, "That's it, Rennell, we're going to make an emergency landing on that dirt road."
After a very shaky landing, Rennell and Terry were just glad to put their feet on solid ground. Rennell refused to get back in the plane. Being in a small, faraway town, Terry said they had no other option.
He says, "Rennell, there's an airport that's only 15 minutes by flight." He says, "What can happen in 15 minutes?
Once in the air, Rennell could almost immediately see the dim outlines of the next town through the dense fog. She took a deep breath. They were going to make it after all.
Plane came into a mountain head-on, and we hit the mountain at 200 miles per hour. And parts of the plane started to fly everywhere. Sparks were coming up out of the plane. I saw a little cliff, and I knew that once we had nosed into the cliff, that it would be over. And just literally within moments of crashing into this large pile of rocks, we came to a dead halt. I was shocked. I said, "Oh my gosh, we just survived a plane crash." Because at that point, there was not a scratch or bruise on me. And then Terry started screaming, "Get out, get out!" I quickly started to undo my seatbelt, but as I did, I noticed the shoes on my feet started melting like butter off my feet.
The fuel inside the aircraft met with the flames outside.
It just was an instant inferno. It felt like someone took a blowtorch, lit it, and it just inflamed right in your face. And then just then, as you see a strong, muscular hand kind of like this, came out kind of from behind me like this. I just saw a little bit like that, and I just felt this. I just felt peace and tingling go from the center in both directions, and I felt I wasn't going to get hurt.
On the other side of the plane, Rennell was on fire.
The pain of the flames literally drove me down to my knees. I started to crawl across the wingtip as the flames were coming up along the side.
The drizzle finally doused the fire on Rennell's body.
As I sat on the rock, the smoke started to come up over my body, and there was a dead silence.
The aircraft was now a pile of melting metal, swallowed up in the blaze. Terry was nowhere in sight.
At that moment, I started to notice a movement inside the flame.
It was Terry, walking out of the flames toward Rennell.
As he came over to the end of the wingtip, he started to look in the fog, kind of bewildered. He said, "Rennell, where's the man that pulled me out?" I said, "Terry, there was no man."
No one had seen or heard the crash. A grueling 5-mile hike down a mountain through a dense forest began. They had no idea where they were going. Eventually, a truck driver noticed the horrifying sight beside the road.
Well, for the first time, I saw myself in the mirror and I started to scream. My head was swollen out to the distance of my shoulder. My face was black and charred.
The physical and emotional pain
As I saw my face
overwhelmed
black and charred, I
Rennell.
started screaming.
Her body went into shock, and then cardiac arrest.
And at the moment it became very black, I started to feel like my feet were going first into a very tight tunnel, and flashes of light started flashing by me at great speed.
What was similar to other near-death experiences, Rennell also encountered a vision that would force her to cling to whatever life was left in her.
I moved into the path and I saw a young man coming toward me. He was tall and he was handsome.
This young man told Rennell that she had to return to Earth, that he needed her to be there in order for him to be born. Rennell came back to life, but constantly hovered on the brink of death.
I think it's unimaginable to most of us. The hurt, the pain, they didn't think she would live.
But she did pull through, and just as miraculous, faith triumphed, and Rennell and Terry's love reignited, saving their failing marriage. After months in the hospital, she could go home and see her 2 children again.
Coming home was probably the hardest moment that I think I can remember, because when I came home, I was wearing this mask.
Rennell's mother prepared the children.
Probably one of the most traumatizing experiences that I had was when Jason first saw me. He grabbed my mom's leg and he started to shake. And he started to scream, and all I wanted to do was just put my arms around him and tell him it was going to be okay. And I said, "Jason, I am your mom, and I do love you." And in the tears, he smiled, and he turned around, and he grabbed my neck, and he never did let go.
After hundreds of operations and skin grafts, Rennell was finally on the road to a long and traumatic recovery. But one morning, months after the tragic accident, Rennell faced her biggest obstacle yet.
I had just unwrapped all the wrappings off of my body, and they were on a pile on the floor, and Terry had just come out of the shower.
Terry noticed the neighbor's house was on fire.
I ran to the front door. I started banging on it, and no one answered.
She ran inside the garage.
The smoke was very dense, and I started to choke.
Screaming was the only thing she could do to wake the family inside the burning house. Once everyone was safely outside, it was just a matter of minutes before the house collapsed.
In her speaking, in her book, she's done a lot of good. She's come a long, long way. A long, long way. She's touched a lot of hearts and a lot of people, so that the experience has really turned into somewhat a positive thing. And to hear her speak makes me proud.
I look at her every day and just wonder, how she's still here.
Rennell and Terry had only one more wish, to have more children.
They told me I'd never have kids again.
Once again, Rennell beat the odds, but shortly before giving birth, she had another vision.
And as I was laying there on the bed, I saw an image of a young man standing next to me. And he said, "Thank you, Mom." And I said, "Thank you, Nathaniel." And that moment they came in, they turned me around, and I had my son.
Overcoming an inability is something all of us hope to achieve. Overcoming a disability is considered something impossible to achieve, unless you happen to be part of this very special group of achievers. When a skier sweeps and sails down the snowy slopes of a mountain, the rushing adrenaline and the exhilaration of seemingly flying without actually leaving the ground combine to give a sensation of unparalleled abandon. But even the slightest wrong turn at such high velocities could instantly twist this unleashed freedom into an unforgiving and permanent confinement. Such was the case with David Kiley, who at the age of 19 severely injured his spinal cord while skiing with friends. He was told he would never walk, ski, or be able to participate in countless other activities ever again. The news, initially, was devastating. But eventually, the avid skier vowed to one day find a way to propel his now disabled body to the top of a mountain and ski back down. And years later, what some considered a noble but hopeless dream has become a reality, not only for David, but for other physically challenged individuals who have refused to watch from the sidelines in wheelchairs as the world passes them by. On the contrary, here at the California Adaptive Ski School, students have found an outlet where at times the world has to catch up to them.
The school should probably be renamed to the Adaptive Fun School. You know, it doesn't matter that what level of a skier you are or what level of an injury you are. These people here can make it work for you. There's enough equipment today in this day and age that anyone can come out here and enjoy the exciting aspects of skiing and feeling the wind in your face and things that ordinarily people who choose to just stay inbound and at home don't experience, you know, and they're shut off from the smiles and the sunshine.
The program, now in its 8th season at Bear Mountain in Southern California, reaches more people every year. Kelly Malkowitz, the school's executive director, has been there from the beginning.
Adaptive skiing is just like alpine skiing, only we're adapting equipment to put someone with a disability over the center of their ski so they'll experience just as much success as an able-bodied person would. The goal of the school itself is to provide outdoor recreational opportunities for people with disabilities and to get them to a point where they can be independent with their family and friends.
Not only does the Adaptive Ski School help people with injuries like David's, it is also set up to accommodate individuals with a wide range of physical problems.
We service all ages and all disabilities.
The Adaptive School provides everything needed for success, from dedicated instructors to the latest in equipment.
This is basically a sit-down type of ski that uses one standard alpine ski that able-bodied skiers would ski on. This ski enables a person with a disability to have a lot of independence.
That's what I love about skiing, is that I'm able to really ski anywhere. I don't know my disability when I'm on the mountain.
Today, Ralph Martinez is discovering this freedom for the first time, less than a year after a car accident changed his life forever.
I was almost dead going to the hospital. They told my parents that, yeah, he's fighting for his life, so he's gonna make it. I made it. Now I'm here, I'm out here skiing. I really enjoyed skiing before my accident, and since I got in an accident, I'm paraplegic now, and they told me you can still ski. I said, well, I'm out there, I'm doing it.
Nice and straight, off to the right, reach out, look right.
Due to the efforts of over 200 volunteer instructors, Program Director Tom Pierce believes the special connection students share with teachers is the key which determines their success as skiers.
It's a very close one-on-one trusting relationship they develop with their guide.
Let's try leaning to your right side, uphill. And that's what it takes. You're over. I'm not even holding you now. It's great.
Sue Ono, a physical therapist from UCLA, is a volunteer at the Adaptive School. This week, she's working with Sam Yee, a student with cerebral palsy.
This is a great outlet for people to get some speed, to enjoy the outdoors. It's really wonderful.
Connie Hunt works with visually impaired students Today, she is instructing Josh Peters, a 7-year-old, who has been legally blind since birth. Josh's first lesson ever was just 1 week ago.
We started out just reviewing what he'd learned that day, and I had him up on some of the higher runs this morning, and that's where he wanted to stay all day. He was doing his turns, he was doing things that some people need weeks to learn.
High five!
In addition to teaching the fundamentals of skiing, the adaptive school also offers a chance to build self-confidence.
I think it makes them realize that they don't need to set limits on themselves.
Student Janelle Smith recognizes that her ability to ski isn't all she's gained from the program.
It's helped make me stronger, and I'm more willing to try other things and do things like water skiing and other things that I wouldn't do before.
They've learned that they can overcome a lot of the obstacles they might otherwise face.
Here at the California Adaptive Ski School, students find that what initially seems frightening proves to be the passkey, which opens many doors.
Go out and try it. It's a lot of fun. Might be scared at first, but in the long run, when you finish something, you feel really good about it.
Anybody can do it. You might fall in the snow, but it's just snow. It doesn't hurt. Get out there and do it. That's all you got to do.
If you're in the house or if you're thinking that everything has to be passive and negative, come to the Adaptive Ski School and get a lesson in smiles.
And in these smiles, one can practically see freedom. You don't need to look to the heavens to see the wonderful things happening before you. As we've seen, miracles can happen to anyone, whether in a grand fashion or in simple solutions within our soul. Keep in mind that the miracle always starts with one important thing: you. I'm Lee Majors. Good night.
A best-selling author claims his first alien encounter occurred when he was only 8 years old. A woman in another state gives an identical account. Are they telling the truth? Our panel of experts will help you decide. Out there, somewhere beyond the confines of our solar system, in the farthest reaches of space, other intelligent beings exist. So we're told by scholars and scientists. Here on our own planet, in our own backyards, we are being visited. So we're told by countless witnesses who speak of their experiences, who say they have made contact.
Whitley Strieber told the world about his encounters with aliens in his book Communion. Strieber now claims to have been taught by aliens in an interdimensional schoolroom as a young boy growing up in San Antonio, Texas. Are Strieber's claims a clever marketing tool for yet another book? Or did he actually make contact? Is Strieber's secret school an isolated incident? Are there more classrooms? Reporter Tracy Braddock uncovers that story later in the program. And finally, reporter Harvey Shane consults the experts. How do they explain this phenomenon?
Over the past 5 decades, there have been thousands of documented reports by reliable individuals claiming to have had close personal encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Many have reported not only sightings of aliens, but also actual abductions and even strange and frightening medical procedures being performed. Are these simply lies or fantasies gone wild? Or is it possible there is some truth to the stories? Attempts to explain many of these accounts have proven fruitless, while other stories have stood up to incredible scrutiny, both from those in the scientific community and from experts in human psychology as well. San Antonio, Texas. It is from this unlikely setting that some of the most intriguing claims of extraterrestrial contact have emerged. What may be the most unsettling aspect of these reports is that most of them involve children. Advertising executive turned horror novelist Whitley Strieber is best known as the author of Communion. The 1987 book told the allegedly true account of Strieber's encounter with and abduction by extraterrestrial visitors. The bestseller was made into a movie and proved to be as popular a subject on screen as it was in print. Strieber is currently working on a new book called The Secret School, which deals with some extremely bizarre occurrences from the author's childhood. According to Strieber, there was a period of his early life, starting at about age 8, when he remembers waking up in the night by some unknown force.
When I was a little boy, for reasons that I am just now beginning to piece together and find clear memory of, in the middle of North San Antonio, there is a flood control area called the Almas Basin. I used to get on my bicycle at the ages of 8 and 9 and 10, the middle of the night at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and ride a couple of miles through the dark streets of San Antonio to the basin and down a path into the basin. It was only after I had that happen that I began to look at my memories. And I began to think, well, what were you doing? What were you doing? And it's been a struggle. It turned out, after I published Communion and mentioned my thoughts about the basin, that all kinds of people in this area, especially right around the basin, have had extraordinary anomalous experiences, including many UFO encounters.
We accompanied Whitley Strieber, along with Ed Conroy, author of Report on Communion, to the scene of his unusual memories. We set out into the basin on the same path Strieber followed as a boy. An enormous, oddly shaped live oak on the basin path served as a landmark to the young student on his way to the midnight encounters. According to Strieber, he would ride his bike into the basin. The tree signified the location of what he called the secret school.
This is the first time I've been here in about 3 or 4 years, but I haven't actually been out and tried to find the spot where the schoolhouse was. And this was an interdimensional schoolhouse, you understand. Other people saw it. Some of them saw it as a schoolroom. Some of them saw it as a domed place. I saw it as a schoolhouse. I can't believe it. I thought this was also in the parallel world. I did not realize this was in the physical universe. And it's here. I haven't seen this. The thing that's so amazing is the last time I passed this tree must have been on my last trip to the secret school when I was 12. Really? And I've never seen it again. I can't believe that it's like this, that it would be, that I've come back in here from time to time, but I've never actually known that this was physically here until this second. The secret schoolroom was right over there, probably within a few yards of here.
In a moment, we'll see what happens when Whitley Strieber rediscovers the mysterious secret school. Author Whitley Strieber has just led us to a spot where he says, as a child, he had numerous encounters with otherworldly visitors.
Remember I was saying that part of the time we sat on a bench? Yeah. There's the bench. There's the bench. Whitley. That's extraordinary. I mean, I sat on that bench so long ago. This is where it started, sitting side by side, and now I remember so well. This is where I sat with beings from another world when I was a little boy and learned from them everything that eventually, this is where it started. I just simply cannot believe this is physically here.
What Whitley remembers most is the being's appearance and the impact their teaching had on his life. Strieber describes what they wore.
Totally black cloth from head to foot with a heavy black wimple and no white. And I was always wanting to look in it to see her face, of course. Never could see her face, never could see her hands. The image of the creation of the moon is the one I've been working on lately that I remember coming to me right here on this bench. And the moon is the engine of life on Earth. She was showing me the beginning of everything when she showed me that picture. That's what the secret school was about for me, that sort of thing.
According to Ed Conroy, who researched and wrote about Strieber's experiences in a book called Report on Communion, there were others who had encounters here.
In Whitley's case, in researching his story, I found that he was drawn to this energy center, so to speak, and that many, many other people who I began to talk to in the course of doing my research were likewise, similarly, drawn here inexplicably. Sometimes in the middle of the night, they were often children, mostly children at the time that they were having these experiences. And as a simple matter of fact, most of the adult witnesses who I spoke to remember seeing UFOs flying over the basin, over this neighborhood, when they were children.
The lack of empirical evidence seems to be a common element which runs through many encounter reports. The only evidence Whitley Strieber presented to us was a large misshapen tree, remnants of what could have been a bench, and his word that he did indeed have an encounter with an alien. Well, this wasn't enough to convince us, so we sent Tracy Braddock in search of another story concerning a secret school outside San Antonio. And she found one.
Sharon Tudor grew up in a small town in Southern California.
I would leave in the middle of the night and go to a place that wasn't far from my parents' home.
Sound familiar? It should. Sharon Tudor has just described her own trek to meet with a strange entity. And like many other people who've described similar encounters, the meeting Sharon Tudor talks about took place at night and over a period of several years.
I went to this place that was about a mile and a half away from my parents' house. And there were these rocks that formed, well, it looked sort of like an abandoned foundation, but they formed this shelter. And there was this woman in a white robe. And I knew she was feminine, even though I hadn't seen her hands or her face because of her voice. But it was really strange because her voice wasn't a voice like we speak on Earth with words or sound. It was almost just right into my brain.
How were you able to get out of your house at that time of night without your parents noticing?
Well, my parents were going through a really bad time at that time. So was I, actually, because what they were going through eventually led to a divorce. So I don't think that they really paid much attention to me, so it's easy to get out.
What happened when you were there?
It's funny, because I don't ever really think of it as a physical place, because what I remember most about it was this lady in white. And I don't even really remember so much the details of the stories and the teachings that she was giving me at the time, but I can just remember the feeling of how incredibly fascinating they were.
Fascinating indeed. Jefferson shares many of the same geological properties with San Antonio, plus a few of its anomalies. Sharon heard tales of the origin of the solar system, the time-space continuum, and information we are only now starting to receive from the Hubble telescope.
When did you start having these memories?
Well, I can't really remember a time when I didn't have this image of the lady in white. She just always seemed to be there.
Difficulties in her relationship led Sharon to seek therapy. It was here, under intense therapy sessions, that Sharon's mysterious memories began to make sense.
I think the jarring of my memory mostly came from when my therapist had asked me to go back in my memory and really think of a comforting time in my life, because I was a wreck physically and emotionally with my divorce. So that's when things became intensified, and I remembered. And I remembered it very clearly.
Do you think there's any possibility that this lady in white, this woman who was teaching you, who was nurturing you, was created by you subconsciously?
Well, it's funny that you should say that, because it's actually what my therapist suggested to me also. But this happened when I was, let's see, about 8 or 9. And all I can say is that going back in my memory and really thinking about this, I know that these experiences happened and that they were real. I mean, I was learning this from another being. It was just
a feeling. I don't know how else to describe it, because I just knew from the time that I started going it was a very secure, safe place, and I never ever felt afraid.
Two different people, two different locations, two stories that are strikingly similar. Are they lying, crazy, or are they telling the truth? Whitley Strieber's and Sharon Tudor's stories appear to be honest descriptions of their experiences, but to rely solely on anecdotal accounts may be a mistake. To help shed some light on the secret school phenomenon, we send veteran correspondent Harvey Shane to the experts. He begins in Los Angeles.
When it comes to investigating unusual claims, some of the country's most highly qualified professionals are detectives in the Los Angeles Police Department. Daniel K. Stewart, a 17-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department, analyzed Whitley Strieber's account of the secret school.
When you analyze someone, you look for many, many facets of their body language, voice, constriction of the voice, frowns, movement of the feet, legs, and hands. All those are telltale signs of someone who's not being truthful. The voice stress analyzer, when you use that machine, it allows you to look at the voice imprint on stressful questions and come up with, are they or are they not truthful?
And your opinion?
When I analyzed Whitley's graph on the voice stress analyzer's machine, he was a very truthful individual. There was no stress points on the major portions of his interview that would indicate that he was untruthful or trying to be deceptive. I find him to be a very credible and good witness.
Grant McNaughton is a physician and a retired Air Force colonel who has had a great deal of experience interviewing alleged abductees. Dr. McNaughton explains the similarities in Sharon Tudor's and Whitley Strieber's stories.
Our sensory systems are very plastic. I mean, they're easily molded. And people that have vivid imaginations, or that have a lot of imagination, can occasionally convince themselves that something is really happening to them.
And your conclusion about Whitley Strieber's account?
This is simply the power of suggestion, and it works enormous wonders in people. So could he be a victim of his own power of suggestion? Sure. We all are to some degree.
Daniel Stewart and Grant McNaughton have stated their findings on the claims of Whitley Strieber and Sharon Tudor. But are there other factors to investigate? And that brings me here to the University of California's Santa Barbara campus, where fantastic claims are being scrutinized routinely as part of an ongoing study. Dr. Saul Perrine, chief psychologist, chairs the study of paranormal claims as part of the psychology department on campus. Dr. Perrine is a specialist in the emerging field of reclaimed memory. One tool used to retrieve memories is hypnosis. But is hypnosis a reliable method?
Harvey, what people don't understand is that hypnotism is no more accurate than actual memory. There have been tests, Harvey, where subjects vividly remember imaginary incidents that were explained to them by their doctor prior to hypnosis. In other words, the event was explained to them, they go into hypnosis, and they recall it as if it were real.
Could these events be real?
It's possible. There's a psychological mechanism called confabulation. This happens when actual events are woven together with things we've heard from others, things that have happened since, and in the case of those with more imagination, even complete wishful thinking. It happens when you think of the biggest day of your life or the greatest coaster ride you ever had when you were 5 or 6 years of age.
Our three experts all seem to agree that Whitley Strieber and Sharon Tudor believe what they experienced was genuine. Strieber passed the voice stress analysis given by Daniel K. Stewart. McNaughton and Perrine suggested that psychological mechanisms may have been employed by the witnesses, but neither expert would flat out rebuke Strieber's and Tudor's stories. The case of the secret school? It's just too close to call. It's up to you to decide. The secret school. Alien creatures who impart incredible cosmic knowledge to young minds. Both witnesses contend they are telling the truth. The panel of experts seem to agree to the witnesses' sincerity, although not necessarily to the accuracy of their stories. We have to ask why. Why would anyone disclose such stories and risk the ridicule of society? What do witnesses have to gain from these fantastic claims? And why have sightings, encounters, and abductions become such an intricate part of our culture? Well, perhaps we'll never know. But as long as there are reports of contact, we will investigate the claims. Thanks for joining us.